"You're fired," he bellowed, satisfied, for all to hear. She didn't cry, didn't beg, she only smiled, because that arrogant man didn't know she had just bought the entire company, and his world was about to crumble. The lobby of Lion City Holdings, LCH, was a monument to power, with marble floors reflecting the lights like mirrors, glass walls offering panoramic views of the entire city from above, and a heavy silence broken only by the hurried clicking of heels and hushed phone calls. It was the kind of place where people walked fast, spoke little, and never met the eyes of those they deemed beneath their level. Priya Sharma knew that building better than anyone, not because she worked in one of its luxurious offices, nor because she attended executive meetings on the top floor. She knew it because for years she had walked those very corridors, pushing a cleaning trolley, just as her grandmother, Madame Amelia Lim, had done before her. That morning, Priya entered through the service door. As always, the back corridor smelled of industrial disinfectant and that particular solitude known only to those who toil in the shadows of lavish buildings. She put on her cleaning uniform in the small basement changing room, where the rusty lockers groaned each time someone opened them. "Good morning, Priya." Chloe Tan's voice, the main lobby receptionist, arrived like a ray of light amidst the gray routine. Chloe was one of the few people in the entire building who took the time to greet the cleaning staff by name. "How's your grandmother doing?" "She's better, thank you," Priya replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "The doctors say she needs rest, but you know her. She never stops for a second. Madame Amelia has more energy than all the executives in this building combined." Chloe chuckled softly. "Hey, be careful. Today." Mr. Tay arrived in a foul mood. He fired 2 people before 9 a.m. Priya nodded, feeling that familiar knot in her stomach that appeared whenever someone mentioned Marcus Tay. The CEO of Lion City Holdings was known for many things, but kindness was none of them. He had inherited the position from his father, who in turn had inherited it from the original founder, Mr. Augustus Wong. But while Mr. Augustus had built the company with respect and honest work, Marcus ruled it with an iron fist and an arrogance that made anyone who crossed his path tremble. Priya pushed her trolley towards the service elevator. The wheels squeaked softly as she traversed the corridors connecting the invisible world of maintenance staff with the gleaming world of executives. It was a brutal contrast. On one side, peeling paint and flickering fluorescent lights. On the other, artworks and expansive windows framing the city like a painting. Upon reaching the executive floor, Priya began her routine. Emptying waste bins, wiping desks, tidying meeting rooms. It was a job she did with precision and silence, just as her grandmother had taught her. "In this world, my dear," Madame Amelia used to say, "it suits people like us to be invisible. Because when you are invisible, you see everything, and what you see, no one can take from you." Priya never fully understood those words. Until that day. She was cleaning the main boardroom when she heard voices approaching. Instinctively, she sped up her work to finish before they arrived, but the door opened before she could complete it. Marcus Tay entered like a storm. He was a man who commanded every room, not with his physical presence, but with his ego. He walked as if the world owed him something, and spoke as if every word he uttered was an unappealable decree. Behind him came Kenneth Leong, his corporate lawyer, carrying a stack of documents and nodding at everything Marcus said like a bobblehead. "And I want those contracts ready by Friday." Marcus spoke without pause. "If the Pacific Consortium doesn't sign, we'll crush them with competition. It's that simple." "Of course, Mr. Tay," Kenneth replied. "But there's a slight issue with the clauses on." "There are no issues, Kenneth. There are only incompetents who can't solve them." Marcus stopped abruptly when he saw Priya in the room. His expression changed instantly, as if he had found a stain on his imported suit. "What are you doing here?" His voice was like a whip. "Cleaning, sir," Priya replied calmly, keeping her eyes down as she gathered her tools. "The board meeting starts in 10 minutes. Why weren't you finished earlier?" "There was a delay in access schedule this morning, sir. Building security changed shifts and excuses." Marcus interrupted her with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Always excuses. It's the only thing people like you know how to give." Priya gripped the handle of her trolley so hard her knuckles ached. Every fiber of her being wanted to retort, to defend herself, to tell him she was no less than anyone, but she swallowed her words, as she had learned to do so many times before. "I'm leaving now, sir," she said simply, pushing the trolley towards the door. "Wait," Marcus stopped her. There was something in his tone that made Priya's stomach clench. She turned slowly. Marcus stood by the boardroom table, where a crystal vase held a floral arrangement Priya herself had placed that morning, as per administration's instructions. You put these flowers here? Yes, sir. The floor manager asked me to. And whose bright idea was it to put sunflowers? Marcus picked up the vase and examined it with disgust. This looks like HDB block void deck decorations. The Pacific Consortium directors will think we're a classless company. They were the flowers provided by the decorator service, sir. You only don't think. Marcus set the vase down on the table with a thud that echoed through the room. It's incredible. You can't even do the most basic thing without messing it up. Kenneth watched the scene in silence, his eyes darting between Marcus and Priya like someone watching an accident about to happen. Priya took a deep breath. It wasn't the first time Marcus had humiliated her. There was a pattern. He sought any excuse to make those he deemed inferior feel small. And the cleaning staff were always at the bottom of his hierarchy of contempt. I'm sorry, sir. If you wish, I can change the flowers immediately. What I wish for is competent staff. Marcus sat at the head of the table, loosening his tie with irritation. But apparently, that's too much to ask for in this company. Priya left the room with what little dignity Marcus had left intact. In the corridor, her hands trembled, not from fear, but from suppressed rage. From years of accumulated anger, Chloe intercepted her near the elevator. Are you all right? I saw you leave the boardroom and I'm fine, Priya lied. I just need a moment. Priya, don't let that man steal your peace. He treats everyone like that. Last week, he made his own personal assistant cry in front of the entire finance department. I know, Priya sighed. But sometimes I wonder for how long. Until he meets someone bigger than him, Chloe replied, with a smile that held more wisdom than it let on. Priya spent the rest of the morning on autopilot, cleaning offices, emptying waste bins, disinfecting restrooms that executives used without ever wondering who kept them spotless each day. It was honest work, and Priya did it with the same dedication her grandmother had for decades. But while cleaning, something unexpected happened. She was in Daniel Lee's office, the finance director, when she saw a document on his desk. Normally, Priya never looked at executive papers. Her grandmother had taught her that discretion was sacred, but this time, a name on the document caught her attention like a magnet. Sharma. Not just Sharma, it was Amelia Lim Sharma. Priya's heart stopped. Her grandmother, in a financial document of Lion City Holdings? And what did Sharma mean? Her grandmother had always been Amelia Lim. Just Lim. Before she could read more, the office door opened. Daniel Lee entered, talking on the phone. Priya immediately looked away from the document and pretended to be cleaning the desk. Yes, Kenneth, I know. Daniel spoke impatiently. But if someone finds those original documents, we're in serious trouble. We need to make sure the old woman never talks. She doesn't even know what she has. Priya felt a chill run down her spine. The old woman, the same words she had heard used to refer to domestic staff all her life. But this time there was something more. A weight. A veiled threat. Daniel noticed her and abruptly hung up. Are you done here? He asked gruffly. Yes, sir. I was just leaving. Priya left the office, her heart pounding so hard she thought Daniel might hear it. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions. Why was her grandmother's name in the company's financial documents? What did Sharma mean? And what old woman were Daniel and Kenneth talking about? At the end of her shift, Priya changed in the basement locker room with trembling hands. She needed to talk to her grandmother. She needed answers. But when she left the building through the service door, she found something that transformed her urgency into alarm. Her phone had 4 missed calls from her neighbor, Auntie Rosie. She called back immediately. Priya, thank goodness. Auntie Rosie's voice trembled. Your grandmother had an episode. She collapsed in the kitchen. The ambulance took her to National City Hospital. Priya's world stopped. The glass and marble building of Lion City Holdings loomed behind her, imposing and indifferent, as she frantically ran towards the avenue, desperately searching for a taxi. She didn't know that the document she had seen in Daniel Lee's office was just the tip of an iceberg that would change her life forever. She didn't know that her grandmother's name hid a secret that the most powerful men in that company had tried to bury for years. And she definitely didn't know that very soon Marcus Tay would kneel before her. But destiny has its own timeline, and the clock had just started ticking. Priya arrived at National City Hospital with her heart in her throat. She had run the last 3 blocks because traffic was at a standstill, and the taxi driver told her it would be faster on foot. Her lungs burned, her legs trembled, but none of that mattered. Only getting there mattered. The emergency room was controlled chaos. Nurses walked briskly. The constant beeping of monitors. Families waited with expressions that mixed hope and terror. Priya approached the reception desk. unable to control the tremor in her voice. Amelia Lim. She was brought in by ambulance. She's my grandmother. The nurse checked her screen with that professional calm that sometimes seems cruel to those in despair. Room 7. Left corridor. The doctor is already with her. Priya practically ran down the corridor. When she opened the room door, her heart sank. Madame Amelia lay in bed, connected to a monitor that marked her heartbeat with a steady beep. Her face, always full of life and mischief, was pale, her eyes closed, and an oxygen mask covered her nose and mouth. She seemed smaller than ever, more fragile, as if the bed were swallowing her. "Grandma," Priya whispered, taking her hand. It was cold, too cold for someone who had always radiated warmth. "Are you family?" A young doctor entered behind her. His badge read, "Dr. Alex So. I'm her granddaughter, her only family. What happened to her?" "Doctor." So looked at her with that expression doctors use, when the news is not the best, but not the worst either. "Your grandmother suffered a fainting spell caused by extreme exhaustion and stress. Her vital signs are stable now, but she needs absolute rest. Her body is sending clear signals that she has been under too much pressure for too long." "Stress?" Priya frowned. "My grandmother retired a long time ago. She lives quietly at home. Stress is not always physical, Miss Sharma. Sometimes it's emotional. Sometimes it's a burden someone carries internally without anyone noticing." Those words hit Priya with unexpected force. What secret burden was her grandmother carrying? Dr. So left to attend to other patients, leaving Priya alone with Madame Amelia. The silence in the room was only interrupted by the monitor's beep and the distant murmur of the hospital. Priya pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, not letting go of her grandmother's hand. She closed her eyes and tried to think clearly. The day's images rushed through her mind. Marcus's humiliation, the document with her grandmother's name, the conversation between Daniel and Kenneth. And now this, Amelia Lim Sharma. That name kept circling in her head. Wong was the surname of Mr. Augustus, the founder of Lion City Holdings. Everyone knew that story. Mr. Augustus had built the company from scratch, making it one of the most important in the region. But he had died years ago, and control had passed to the Tay family, who had a stake on the board of directors. What connection could her grandmother, a woman who had spent her life cleaning offices, have with the founder of one of the country's most powerful companies? A gentle movement pulled her from her thoughts. Madame Amelia was slowly opening her eyes, blinking at the fluorescent light like someone emerging from a deep sleep. "Grandma," Priya leaned towards her, squeezing her hand. "I'm here. You're in the hospital. Are you all right?" Madame Amelia turned her head towards her granddaughter. Her eyes, though tired, retained that spark of intelligence that had always characterized her. With trembling hands, she removed her oxygen mask. "My dear," her voice was barely a hoarse whisper. "What happened?" "You fainted in the kitchen." Auntie Rosie called the ambulance. That Rosie, always so dramatic. Madame Amelia tried to smile, but a grimace of pain crossed her face. "I was just tired." "The doctor said it was stress, Grandma. What's worrying you so much?" Madame Amelia averted her gaze to the window. Outside, the sky was darkening, the first stars timidly appearing behind the clouds. Her expression changed, as if an internal battle was raging behind those tired eyes. "Priya, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." The tone of her voice made Priya sit up straight in her chair. It wasn't the tone of a grandmother giving household advice. It was the tone of someone who has carried a secret too heavy for too long. "Grandma, what is it?" Madame Amelia looked directly into her eyes. "Did you ever wonder why I never told you about your grandfather?" Priya blinked. It was true. In all her years, her grandmother had never mentioned her husband. When Priya asked as a child, Madame Amelia would change the subject with a skill that only years of practice can perfect. Eventually, Priya stopped asking, assuming it was a painful topic. "I always thought it hurt you to remember him." "It wasn't pain, my dear. It was fear." Madame Amelia closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength. "Your grandfather's name was Augustus. Augustus Wong." The world stopped. Priya felt as if the ground beneath her feet had vanished, leaving her floating in a void of disbelief. The white hospital walls seemed to expand infinitely as her brain tried to process what she had just heard. "Mr. Augustus Wong?" Her voice came out strangled. "The founder of Lion City Holdings?" Madame Amelia nodded slowly, and a tear rolled down her cheek. "Augustus and I met when we were young. He wasn't anyone important yet. He was a hardworking young man with huge dreams and a heart bigger than his ambitions. We fell in love. We got married in secret because his family would never have accepted him marrying a woman with no money or social standing. Grandma, Priya couldn't form coherent thoughts. Why did you never tell me? Because when Augustus started to succeed, the people around him began to poison his world. His partners told him that a marriage to someone like me would ruin his image, his company, everything he was building. Augustus fought against them for a long time, but the pressure was overwhelming. Madame Amelia's voice broke. Then came Horacio Te, Marcus's father. He became Augustus's partner. He invested money in the company, but his true interest was control. He discovered our secret marriage and used it as a weapon. He told Augustus that if he didn't distance himself from me, he would expose everything publicly and destroy the company. And he left you? Priya felt a mix of rage and sadness burning in her chest. No, Madame Amelia firmly denied, and some of her old fire shone in her eyes. Augustus never left me. He protected us, in the only way he knew how. He asked me to step away publicly, to pretend we had never married, but he promised me that everything he built was also mine, and he kept his promise. How? Augustus modified the original company documents. In the foundational charter of Lion City Holdings, there's a clause no one knows about. A clause that states 50% of the company legally belongs to his wife, Amelia Lim Sharma. And if she couldn't claim it, that right would pass to her direct descendants. Priya put her hands to her mouth. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Her whole world had turned upside down in an instant. Grandma, that means that half of Lion City Holdings is mine, and when I'm gone, it will be yours. The silence that followed was so profound that Priya could hear the beating of her own heart competing with the beep of her grandmother's monitor. Outside, an ambulance passed with its siren wailing, but inside that room, time had stopped. But how is it possible that no one knows? Priya finally found her voice. If there are legal documents, because Horacio Te did everything possible to hide them. When Augustus fell ill, Horacio took control of the company, and when Augustus died, Horacio made sure the original documents disappeared from official files. Or so he thought. Or so he thought. Madame Amelia smiled, and for an instant, she looked like the strong woman Priya had always known. Augustus wasn't foolish, my dear. He knew Horacio would try something like that, so he made copies, certified copies by an independent notary, and hid them in a place only I would know to find them. Where? In the only thing Horacio Te would never consider valuable, among the possessions of the cleaning staff. Priya felt a lightning bolt shoot down her spine. In your locker? In the basement changing room of the building? No. Madame Amelia gently shook her head. That would have been too obvious. The documents are in our home, Priya, in a place you've seen every day of your life without knowing what it contained. Where, Grandma? The recipe box my mother left me. The one on the highest shelf in the cupboard. The one that weighs more than a simple recipe book should. Priya remembered that box. It was old, dark wood, with carvings worn by time. It had always been there, part of the kitchen landscape. She had never paid it special attention because her grandmother told her it only contained old recipes and worthless memories. It was there all this time? All this time, Madame Amelia nodded, waiting for the right moment. And why now? Why are you telling me today? Madame Amelia's expression darkened. Because someone else knows. Someone in the company discovered that copies of the original documents exist. They don't know where they are, but they are looking. And they are pressuring me. Pressuring you how? Weeks ago, a man came to the house. He said he was a lawyer for Lion City Holdings. He offered me money to sign a document renouncing any possible claim on the company. I told him I didn't know what he was talking about, but he didn't believe me. Kenneth Leong, Priya murmured, remembering Marcus's lawyer. I don't know his name, but since then I've felt like someone is watching the house, that someone is following me when I go out. The stress of knowing they're close, of protecting those documents, of being afraid they'll involve you, that's what brought me here. Priya stood up, a fierce determination igniting in her chest like a bonfire. Grandma, no one is going to take what's ours. No one. My dear, you have to be careful. These people have power, money, connections. They can make someone's life disappear without a trace. You yourself taught me that when you are invisible, you see everything. Priya took her grandmother's hand and squeezed it tightly. Well, I've been invisible in that building my whole life, and I've seen more than they think. Madame Amelia looked at her, tears rolling freely down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were of pride. That deep pride only a grandmother can feel when she sees the seed she planted has grown into something stronger than she ever imagined. You're just like him, she whispered. You have your grandfather's eyes and his fire. Priya kissed her grandmother's forehead. Rest. I'll take care of everything. She left the room with firm steps, but inside, she was a volcano about to erupt. She pulled out her phone and searched for a number she hoped she would never need. It was a contact Chloe had given her months ago, saying, "Just in case you ever need someone to fight for you." She dialed the number. "Isabel Lim. My name is Priya Sharma. I need a lawyer, and I need the best." On the other end of the line, a firm voice replied, "Tell me everything." As Priya walked down the hospital corridor, the fluorescent lights cast her elongated shadow against the white walls. She was no longer the shadow of a frightened cleaning staff member. She was the shadow of a woman who had just discovered that the empire where she was humiliated belonged to her, and that the man who shouted at her every morning had no idea who was sitting on his own throne. Priya didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, her grandmother's words returned like an echo that refused to fade. "Half of Lion City Holdings is mine, and when I'm gone, it will be yours." It was too big, too impossible, too real. Before dawn, Priya was already standing in the kitchen of the small house she shared with her grandmother. It was a modest house, with walls that needed painting and a roof that sang with every rain. But it was their home, the only one she had ever known. And now it turned out that the woman living in that humble house was the rightful owner of half a business empire. Priya looked towards the cupboard. There it was, on the highest shelf, almost touching the ceiling. The recipe box. She had seen it all her life. As a child, when her grandmother cooked, she would sometimes take it down to consult some handwritten recipe on yellowed papers. It never seemed special, just an old box with memories from another era. Now that box contained her destiny. She pulled up a chair, carefully climbed onto it, and reached for it. It was dark wood, heavier than she remembered. The carvings on the lid were worn by time, but flowers and birds carved with a delicacy that spoke of patient hands could still be distinguished. She placed it on the kitchen table and stared at it for a long moment, as if she were about to open something sacred. With trembling hands, she lifted the lid. On top of everything were the recipes. Dozens of loose sheets, written in the unmistakable handwriting of her grandmother and great-grandmother. Recipes for soups, stews, desserts that filled the house with aromas, Priya associated with unconditional love. She carefully took them out, placing them aside. Beneath the recipes was a layer of embroidered cloth. She removed it and found old photographs. Her grandmother, young, radiant, with a smile Priya had rarely seen on the tired woman she knew. And next to her, a man with a noble gaze and a warm expression. On the back of the photo, in shaky handwriting, it said, "Augustus and Amelia, happiest day." Priya caressed the photograph with her fingers. Her grandfather, the man who had built an empire and who had loved a humble woman so fiercely that he moved mountains to protect her. Below the photos, her fingers touched something different, something rigid, wrapped in protective plastic. She carefully took it out. It was a thick envelope, sealed with adhesive tape that had darkened over the years. She opened it slowly, almost reverently, and extracted its contents. Documents. Many documents, notarial acts, with official seals, marriage certificates, and most importantly, a certified copy of the foundational charter of Lion City Holdings, where in the 12th clause, in impeccable typeface, it clearly read, "It is established that 50% of the foundational shares of the company shall be the inalienable property of Madame Amelia Lim Sharma, spouse of the founder. And in case of her incapacity or demise, this right shall be fully transferred to her direct descendants." Mr. Augustus Wong's signature was at the bottom, and next to it, the signature of the public notary who certified the document with official seal and registration number. Priya laid the document on the table and had to sit down because her legs gave out. There was the proof. It wasn't her grandmother's tale. It wasn't a sick old woman's fantasy. It was real. As real as the paper that now trembled between her fingers. Her phone rang, startling her. It was a number she didn't know. "Miss Sharma, this is Isabel Lim. I received your call last night. I'm sorry I couldn't answer sooner. Can we meet today?" Isabel's voice conveyed confidence, competence, and something else, genuine interest. It wasn't the tone of someone going through the motions. It was the tone of someone who listens when a person needs to be heard. "Yes," Priya replied. "Do you know the Haven Cafe near National City Hospital? I'll be there in an hour." Priya put all the documents in her bag, photographed them one by one with her phone as a precaution, and left the house, making sure to double-lock the door. A new paranoia had settled in her chest. If someone from Lion City Holdings was looking for those documents, her small house was no longer safe. The Haven Cafe was exactly what its name promised. A warm, discreet place where conversations were lost amidst the noise of the coffee machine and the soft music playing from old speakers. Priya chose a table in the farthest corner. Isabel Lim arrived exactly when she said she would. She was a woman who walked with the confidence of someone who knows exactly who she is and what she can achieve. She carried a briefcase, worn from use, but clean, a sign of someone who works hard but takes care of her tools. Priya greeted her with a firm handshake. "Chloe told me about you a while ago. She said one day I'd need you." It seems she was right. "You know, Chloe, we've been friends since childhood. She knows I specialize in cases of patrimonial rights and corporate justice. I work with people who have been dispossessed of what belongs to them by powerful companies or individuals." Priya took out the documents and placed them on the table. Isabel examined them one by one, her expression transforming with each page. It went from professional curiosity to astonishment, and from astonishment to something that resembled controlled indignation. "Priya," she finally said, taking off her glasses to look directly at her, "do you have any idea what you have here?" "Half of Lion City Holdings." 8. Not only that, you have a case of patrimonial concealment that could shake the foundations of this country's corporate system. These documents prove that for years the Tay family has been operating with assets that legally do not fully belong to them. That's not just unfair, it's a crime. What do we need to do? Isabel methodically organized the documents. "First, I need to verify the authenticity of these papers with an independent expert. If they are legitimate, and everything indicates they are, we will file a claim for patrimonial recognition." "But Priya, you need to understand something. The moment the Tay family learns you have these documents, they will use all their power to destroy you." "They already do," Priya replied with a sad smile. "Only until now they did it without knowing who I really am." Isabel looked at her with renewed respect. "I like your attitude, but I need you to be smart, not just brave. No one can know about these documents until we have the entire case legally airtight. Understand?" "No one." "I understand." "Good. Give me a few days to work with the expert and prepare the legal strategy. Meanwhile, continue with your normal life. Go to work, clean those offices, and above all, don't give Marcus Tay any reason to notice you." Priya nodded, but fate had other plans. Days later, Priya arrived at Lion City Holdings for her usual shift. Everything seemed normal. The same gleaming marble, the same icy air conditioning, the same parade of executives who looked at her without seeing her. Chloe gave her morning smile from reception, and Priya began her routine. But when she reached the executive floor, she felt something was different. There was an unusual tension in the air. Assistants whispered among themselves. Executives walked faster than usual, and muffled shouts could be heard from Marcus Tay's office through the glass doors. Priya pushed her trolley towards the boardroom, keeping her head down and her ears wide open, just as her grandmother had taught her. As she passed Marcus's office, the door burst open. Daniel Lee came out first, with the expression of someone who had just survived a storm. Behind him, Marcus appeared in the doorway, his face distorted by a fury Priya had never seen, even on his worst days. "I want to know who leaked that information," Marcus shouted. "Someone in this company is talking to people they shouldn't, and when I find out who it is, they will deeply regret it." Priya continued pushing her trolley, pretending not to hear anything, but her heart pounded like a war drum. Leaked information, someone talking. Did they know something about the documents? "Mr. Tay, I assure you we are investigating." Kenneth Leong appeared behind Daniel. His voice was calm as always, but with a new edge. "But we need to be discreet if this goes public." "Don't talk to me about discretion," Marcus interrupted him. "A journalist called this morning asking about the company's foundational charter." "The foundational charter, Kenneth? Who knows about that?" Priya felt the air freeze in her lungs. A journalist? She hadn't spoken to any journalist. Isabel had told her to maintain absolute silence. "So who?" "We'll find out, sir," Kenneth replied. "But in the meantime, I suggest we review all access to the company's historical archives. If someone was looking for old documents..." Marcus's gaze swept the corridor like a searchlight looking for fugitives. His eyes stopped on Priya, who was pretending to clean a shelf with exaggerated concentration. "You!" His voice hit her like a slap. Priya turned slowly. "Sir? How long have you been cleaning this floor?" "Quite some time, sir." "And have you ever seen anything strange? People searching through archives? Misplaced documents?" Priya looked him directly in the eyes. It was an instant, a second of eye contact that lasted an eternity. And in that second, Priya saw something she had never seen in Marcus Tay's eyes. Fear. "No, sir," she replied in a calm voice. "I just clean." Marcus watched her for a moment longer. as if trying to read something written in a language he didn't understand. Then he dismissed her with a wave of his hand, that same dismissive gesture he used to push aside everything he considered insignificant. "Get out of here, and tell your supervisor I don't want cleaning staff on this floor for the next few hours." Priya took her trolley and walked towards the elevator. Her hands trembled, but her face remained serene. As she waited for the doors to open, she heard Marcus say something that chilled her blood. "Kenneth, find Uncle George. That old man has been poking around the archives for years. If anyone knows where those original documents are, it's him." The elevator doors opened, and Priya stepped in. As she descended, her mind raced. Uncle George. The name sounded vaguely familiar. Her grandmother had mentioned him once years ago as someone who had worked at the company since Mr. Augustus's time. Someone who had been loyal to the founder until the very end. If Marcus was looking for Uncle George, that meant two things: that Uncle George knew something important and that he was in danger. Upon reaching the lobby, Priya discreetly approached Chloe. "Do you know anyone named Uncle George?" Chloe looked at her in surprise. "Uncle George? Of course. He worked here for decades. He was Mr. Augustus Wong's personal assistant. When the Tay family took over, they demoted him to archives manager. He retired a while ago, but sometimes he comes to the building to pick up his mail. Do you know where to find him? He lives nearby, in Maple Heights condominiums, a few blocks away." "But Priya, why are you asking about him?" "Because I think someone who can help me needs help first." Priya left the building with a clear mission. She needed to find Uncle George before Kenneth Leong did, because something in her instinct told her that man held pieces of the puzzle she was just beginning to assemble. She walked quickly through the streets, her cleaning uniform still on, her bag with her grandmother's documents clutched against her body. The city moved around her with the usual indifference of big metropolises, where millions of stories intersect daily without touching. But Priya's story was about to intersect with Uncle George's. And when that happened, the wall of lies the Tay family had built for years would begin to crack in a way that not all their money could repair. What Priya didn't know was that while she was looking for Uncle George, a journalist named Sean Ng had already found him first, and the information Sean was about to discover would shake Lion City Holdings to its foundations. Maple Heights condominiums was one of those places that were once elegant, but that time had worn down with cruel patience. The facade retained traces of paint that promised vibrant colors, and the entrance stairs creaked with every step, as if whispering stories of better times. Priya climbed to the third floor, looking for the apartment Chloe had indicated. The hallway smelled of freshly brewed coffee and that kind of silent loneliness that inhabits buildings where people live alone with their memories. When she reached the correct door, she heard voices inside. One was an older man's, slow and deep. The other was younger, insistent, with that urgent tone journalists have when they sense they are close to something big. Priya rang the doorbell. The voices stopped abruptly. Slow footsteps approached the door, which opened just enough for a cautious eye to examine her. "Who are you?" asked the older man from behind the door. "I am Priya Sharma, Madame Amelia Lim's granddaughter." The silence that followed was so profound that Priya could hear the wall clock ticking every second from some corner of the apartment. Then, slowly, the door opened completely. Uncle George was a man who carried his years with dignity. His hands showed the marks of decades of work, and his eyes had that particular clarity of those who have seen too much and have remained silent for too long. He looked at Priya as if he were seeing a ghost. "My goodness," he whispered. "You are identical to him, to my grandfather." Uncle George did not respond immediately. He stepped aside to let her pass, and Priya entered an apartment that was practically a museum. The walls were covered with framed photographs, yellowed newspaper clippings, and documents that seemed to belong to another era. In every corner there was evidence of a life dedicated to preserving the memory of something the world had tried to forget. Sitting in an armchair by the window was a young man with an open notebook on his lap and a recorder on the table. He stood up when Priya entered, his expression mixing surprise with something that looked like professional triumph. "Sean Ng," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "I'm an independent journalist. I've been investigating irregularities at Lion City Holdings for a long time." Priya did not shake his hand. She looked at him with distrust. "You were the one who called the company asking about the foundational charter?" Sean had the decency to look uncomfortable. "It was a tactical error. I wanted to gauge Marcus Tay's reaction, and it worked better than I expected. According to my sources, he went into a complete panic." "Your tactical error almost endangered innocent people," Priya replied firmly. "Marcus is now looking for Uncle George, and believe me, he's not coming with kind intentions." Uncle George sat down heavily in his favorite chair, a worn leather armchair that was probably as old as many of his stories. "Sit down, both of you, and stop arguing like children. There are more important things to talk about." Priya and Sean sat forming an involuntary triangle around the coffee table that was covered with papers, folders, and messy photographs. "Priya," Uncle George began, his voice taking on the solemn tone of someone about to share something sacred. "I worked for your grandfather, Augustus, from the very first day he opened the doors of his company. I was just a young man with no education, and he gave me an opportunity when no one else would have. He taught me everything: accounting, administration, negotiation. He used to say that talent doesn't need diplomas, just opportunities." Priya felt a lump in her throat. Her grandfather's words resonated with her grandmother's, like an echo through generations. "I witnessed his marriage to your grandmother, Amelia," Uncle George continued. "I was the best man, in fact. It was a small, secret ceremony, but full of a love I had never seen between two people. Augustus used to say that Amelia was his true wealth, that everything else was just numbers on paper." "And what happened when Horacio Tay arrived?" Priya asked. Uncle George's expression darkened like a sky before a storm. Horacio was everything Augustus was not. Cold, calculating, ambitious, limitless. He presented himself as an investor, a partner, a friend. But from day one, his only goal was to take over the company. Uncle George slowly stood up and walked towards an old filing cabinet in the corner of the room. He opened it with a key he wore around his neck, as if it were a sacred relic. When Horacio discovered Augustus's secret marriage to Amelia, he used it as blackmail. He told him that if he didn't publicly distance himself from Amelia, he would expose everything and ruin the company's reputation. Investors at that time were conservative. An entrepreneur secretly married to his domestic staff would have been an unforgivable scandal. "So my grandfather gave in," Priya murmured. "He didn't give in. He strategically retreated," Uncle George corrected her firmly. "Augustus knew he couldn't win that battle at that moment, but he prepared to win the war. He modified the foundational charter to protect Amelia's rights. He asked me to safeguard an additional copy of all relevant documents and made me promise something." "What did he make you promise?" Uncle George took a thick folder from the filing cabinet and handed it to Priya. "He made me promise that if his family ever needed those documents, I would be there to back their authenticity, not just as a witness, but as a guardian of the truth." Priya opened the folder. Inside were copies identical to the documents she had found in her grandmother's recipe box, but with an addition. Uncle George's sworn affidavits, dated and signed over the years, updating his testimony on the legitimacy of the original documents. "I have kept these declarations current all this time," Uncle George explained. "Every so often I would go before a different notary and renew my testimony. I knew that someday they would be necessary." Sean, who had remained silent, absorbing every word, finally spoke. "Uncle George, this is exactly what I needed to complete my investigation. With Priya's documents and your sworn statements, we have an irrefutable case." "Not so fast," Uncle George raised a hand. "There's something else neither of you knows, something that changed everything for the worse when Augustus fell ill." The air in the room grew denser. Priya leaned forward, her body tense, like a guitar string, about to snap. When Augustus felt his strength abandoning him, he wanted to make the truth public. He wanted to present Amelia as his wife to the world, officially transfer his share of the company to her, and retire in peace, knowing she would be protected. And what stopped him? Horacio Tay found out about his intentions, and what he did was the most despicable thing I have witnessed in my entire life. Uncle George's voice trembled, and for the first time, Priya saw moisture in the old man's eyes. Horacio manipulated Augustus's medical documents to have him declared mentally incapacitated. He obtained a ruling from a corrupt doctor stating that Augustus was not fit to make legal decisions. With that ruling, he blocked any attempt by Augustus to modify the company's legal structure. "They stole his will," Priya whispered, feeling a rage that burned from her stomach to her throat. "They stole his voice," Uncle George corrected. "The most honest man I have ever known. He spent his last days knowing he couldn't protect the woman he loved. I visited him every afternoon. He would squeeze my hand and tell me with his eyes what he could no longer say with words. The silence that followed was unbearable." Priya had tears falling down her cheeks without making any effort to stop them. They were not tears of weakness. They were tears of a sacred fury that was transforming into unwavering determination. "Uncle George," she finally said, wiping her face with the back of her hand, "would you be willing to testify all this publicly? I've been waiting all my life for someone to ask me," the old man replied, with a smile that contained decades of patience. Sean closed his notebook decisively. Priya, listen to me. What you have here is not just a legal case. It's a story the entire country needs to hear. If you allow me to publish this, public opinion will be on your side before Marcus Tay can even react. Priya thought about it carefully. Isabel had told her to remain silent, but Sean's call to the company had already stirred things up. Marcus was looking for Uncle George. The time for discretion was running out. I need to talk to my lawyer first, Priya said. I'm not going to do anything that puts my grandmother or Uncle George at risk. Fair enough, Sean nodded. But we don't have much time. If Marcus finds Uncle George before we secure his testimony legally, a loud knock on the door interrupted them. All three froze. Uncle George Medina, an authoritative voice echoed from the hallway. I am Kenneth Leong, legal representative of Lion City Holdings. I need to speak with you now. The color drained from Uncle George's face. Sean instinctively grabbed his recorder. Priya felt her heart stop and then start racing. The back door, Uncle George whispered, pointing towards the kitchen. It leads to the emergency stairs. I'm not leaving without you, Priya replied firmly. My dear, I am old. They can't do anything to me that they haven't already done. But you have the documents. You are the heir. If they find you here, they will know we are connected, and everything will get complicated. Uncle George, I know you're in there. Kenneth knocked on the door harder. We can do this the easy way, or I can come back with a court order. You choose. Uncle George took the folder from the table and put it in Priya's bag with an urgency that contradicted his age. Go. Take everything, and when the time is right, tell the world the truth. The whole truth. Mr. Augustus asked me to protect you, and that's exactly what I'm doing. Now go. Sean gently took Priya's arm. He's right. Let's go. I can protect this story in another way. With a broken heart, but a clear mind, Priya followed Sean towards the kitchen. As they crossed the small space filled with old pots and domestic memories, she heard Uncle George open the front door with a calm voice. Kenneth, what a surprise. Would you like some coffee? I just brewed some. The last image Priya had before leaving through the back door was of Uncle George, standing with his back straight and dignity intact, facing the representative of the very people who had destroyed his best friend's life. They descended the emergency stairs in silence. When they reached the street, Priya immediately pulled out her phone and called Isabel Lim. Isabel, change of plans. I need to see you right now. Everything accelerated. What happened? I found the key witness, but Kenneth Leong also found him. And now I have twice the documents, twice the evidence, and half the time we thought. Where are you? Near Maple Heights. Don't go home. Don't go to the hospital. Go straight to my office. The address is Shenton Way, North Point Tower, level 6. I'll be waiting for you in 15 minutes. Priya hung up and looked at Sean. Are you coming? I wouldn't miss it for the world, the journalist replied. But Priya, you need to know something. My investigation didn't start by chance. A while ago, I received an anonymous envelope with partial information about irregularities at Lion City Holdings. I didn't know who sent it. But now, after listening to Uncle George, I think I know exactly who it was. Who? Someone inside the company. Someone who has been collecting information for a long time. Someone who works in silence, in the shadows, without anyone suspecting. Priya felt a chill. Daniel Lee? Sean shook his head. No. Someone much more unexpected. Someone Marcus Tay considers absolutely insignificant. Who? Sean looked her directly in the eyes. Chloe Tan. Priya stopped in the middle of the pavement. The city continued to move around her, indifferent, noisy, alive. But for her, the world had just turned another full circle. Chloe, the receptionist who always greeted her with a smile, the woman who had given her Isabel Lim's number, the friend who had never failed her. Chloe was not just an ally. She was the silent spy who had been waiting for years for the exact moment to light the fuse that would explode the Tay family's empire of lies. And that moment had just arrived. Isabel Lim's office was on the 6th floor of a professional building that had seen better days. The elevator was too slow, the hallway lights flickered lazily, and the walls urgently needed a fresh coat of paint. But when Priya crossed the office door, she understood that Isabel didn't spend money on appearances, she spent it on results. Every wall was covered with shelves crammed with files, jurisprudence books, and folders labeled with names Priya didn't recognize, but which probably represented silent victories against corporate giants. In one corner, a whiteboard had diagrams, dates, and arrows connecting names like a battle map. Isabella waited for them standing by her desk with 2 steaming cups of coffee and the expression of someone who hasn't slept but doesn't need to when adrenaline is enough fuel. Sit down, she said without preamble. Tell me everything. Priya spoke for almost an hour, without stopping. She told her about Uncle George, about the sworn affidavits, about the revelation of how Horacio Tay had manipulated Mr. Augustus's medical documents to declare him incapacitated. Isabel took notes with a speed that seemed humanly impossible, interrupting only to ask surgical questions that revealed a legal mind sharp as a scalpel. Sean complimented with his own investigation, months of financial tracking, anonymous sources within the company, suspicious movements in Lion City Holdings accounts, suggesting that the Tay family had been diverting funds for years. When both finished, Isabel leaned back in her chair and looked at them with an expression that mixed gravity with something Priya identified as contained emotion. What we have here is enough to shake the company to its foundations, she said slowly. But I need you to understand something fundamental. If we do this wrong, if we rush, if we leave a single legal loophole, Marcus Tay's lawyers will tear us apart. They have unlimited resources and contacts at all levels of the judicial system. So what do we do? Priya asked. Isabel stood up and walked to the whiteboard. She erased everything that was there and began to write with a red marker. First, we need to certify all the documents, your grandmother's and Uncle George's. An independent handwriting expert must confirm that Mr. Augustus's signatures are authentic. That's already in process. My contact at the Forensic Documentology Institute will give me results soon. She wrote a second point. Second, we need Uncle George's formal testimony before a judge. Sworn statements before a notary are not enough. We need a court to officially recognize his testimony as evidence. And if Kenneth Leong pressures him not to testify? Sean asked. That's why we need to act now, Isabel replied. I'm going to request a judicial protection order for Uncle George as a key witness. If we succeed, any attempt at intimidation by Lion City Holdings will become a federal crime. She wrote a third point. And third, public opinion. Sean, your journalistic investigation is crucial, but we cannot publish anything until the case is formally presented in court. If we publish before, the Tay family will argue that we are conducting a media trial and will ask for all evidence to be disqualified. How much time do you need? Sean pressed. Give me a week and a half at most. Priya closed her eyes. A week. In 1 week, her life had gone from cleaning offices to discovering she was the heir to an empire. What else could change in another week? Her phone vibrated. It was a message from Chloe. Need to see you. Urgent, but not at the company. Raffles Place Park. This afternoon. Priya looked at Sean. Speaking of Chloe, you owe me an explanation. How do you know she was your anonymous source? Sean pulled out his phone and searched through his files. The envelopes for months contained information that only someone with daily access to the building could obtain. Confidential meeting schedules, names of visitors not appearing in official records, unusual staff movements. At first, I thought it was someone from the management team with remorse, but the information was too detailed, too commonplace. It was someone who saw everything without being seen, like a receptionist. Priya completed. Exactly. And when Uncle George mentioned that Augustus always said the most powerful people are the ones nobody notices, it all clicked. Chloe has been at that reception observing, listening, documenting. Every person who enters and leaves the building passes in front of her. Every call is filtered through her phone. Every package passes through her hands. But why? Priya couldn't understand why Chloe would risk her job, her stability, to investigate Lion City Holdings. That's what I don't know, Sean admitted. She never responded to my direct contact attempts. She only sent information. She never asked for anything in return. Priya stored that question in her mind like a flame that needed oxygen to fully reveal itself. That afternoon, Priya arrived at Raffles Place Park with anticipation. It was a tranquil space, surrounded by old trees that provided generous shade. In the center, a fountain that no longer worked served as a meeting point for those who preferred the discretion of open spaces over the intimacy of enclosed ones. Chloe arrived minutes later, but the Chloe Priya saw crossing the park was not the smiling receptionist she knew. This Chloe had red eyes, restless hands, and that tension in her shoulders that betrays someone who has made an irreversible decision. Thanks for coming, she said, sitting next to Priya on an iron bench. Chloe, what's wrong? You're worrying me. Chloe took a deep breath, like someone preparing to jump off a cliff. Priya, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago, but couldn't until I was sure it was the right moment. It has to do with the anonymous envelopes you sent to Sean Ng. The surprise on Chloe's face was genuine. Her eyes widened, and her mouth gaped open as if she had lost her breath. How do you know? Sean deduced it. And now I need you to explain why. Chloe looked down at her hands, which were twisting the edge of her bag with nervous, repetitive movements. When she looked up, tears were welling in her eyes. My mother's name was Grace Tan. She worked as Horacio Tay's personal secretary for years. She was a dedicated, honest woman who believed in the company and the people she worked for. Priya listened in silence, feeling another layer of the puzzle about to be revealed. One day, my mother discovered something in Horacio's files, documents proving that he had falsified Mr. Augustus's medical report to have him declared mentally incapacitated. My mother confronted Horacio. She told him it was a crime, that she couldn't stay silent. Chloe's voice broke. Horacio fired her that same afternoon, without severance, without a letter of recommendation, without anything. But that wasn't the worst part. He used his contacts to ensure that no company in the city would hire her. My mother knocked on door after door for months. No one would see her. No one would give her an opportunity. It was as if she had ceased to exist professionally. Chloe. Priya placed her hand on her friend's. My mother never recovered from that. Not physically, but something inside her died. The strong, determined woman I knew slowly faded away, replaced by someone who was afraid of everything, who trusted no one, who blamed herself for speaking up. Tears streamed freely down Chloe's face. Years later, when I was old enough, I found the papers my mother had kept from her time with Horacio. Copies of documents, meeting notes, records she had saved as evidence in case someday someone would listen to her. And you decided to finish what she started, Priya understood. I got a job at Lion City Holdings, specifically for that. I applied as a receptionist because I knew it was the perfect position to observe without being noticed. I've been there for years, Priya. Years collecting information, documenting irregularities, waiting for the right moment. And why did you never tell me anything? Because I didn't know who you really were until recently. I knew your grandmother had worked in the building. I knew her surname was Lim. But I didn't know her connection to Mr. Augustus until I started cross-referencing information with my mother's documents. Chloe took an envelope from her bag. When I connected the dots and understood that Madame Amelia was the founder's wife, I knew that the missing piece in this whole puzzle was you. That's why I gave you Isabel's number. That's why I always made sure to be close to you in the building. It wasn't just friendship, Priya. It was protection. Protection, because Kenneth Leong has suspected for a while that someone inside the company is leaking information. Weeks ago, he installed additional cameras in common areas. He's been reviewing security access, entry, and exit records of every employee. It's only a matter of time before he discovers me. Priya's stomach clenched. Are you in danger? I'm exactly where I need to be, Chloe replied with a firmness that contrasted with her tears. But there's something I discovered this morning that can't wait. That's why I called you. She opened the envelope and took out a printed sheet. This morning I intercepted an email between Kenneth Leong and an international law firm. They are preparing an emergency legal maneuver to transfer all of Lion City Holdings' assets to a shell company registered overseas. Priya felt the ground move beneath her feet. What does that mean? It means they are emptying the company. If they manage to complete the transfer, when you present your legal claim, there will be nothing to claim. The company will exist only on paper, but all the real assets will be in the hands of a shell corporation controlled by Marcus Tay from another country. How much time do we have? The email mentioned that the transfer documents would be ready for signing soon. If Marcus signs before Isabel presents the case, everything will be over. Priya stood up, a perfect storm forming behind her eyes. I need to call Isabel now. She dialed the number with fingers that trembled not from fear, but from urgency. Isabel, we have a serious problem. Marcus is trying to empty the company. Asset transfer to a shell company. We need to present the case before the documents are signed. The silence on the other end of the line lasted 2 seconds. That felt like hours. Do you have proof of that? I have the printed email. That changes everything. Isabel's voice took on a steel edge. With evidence of fraudulent asset transfer, I can request an emergency injunction that freezes all financial operations of Lion City Holdings. But I need to present it first thing tomorrow morning. And I need you to be there, Priya. You in person, before the judge. I'll be there. One more thing. When we present this, invisibility is over. Marcus Tay will know exactly who you are and what you are claiming. There will be no turning back. Priya looked at Chloe, who was watching her with eyes full of hope and fear at the same time. She thought of her grandmother in that hospital bed, of Uncle George, facing Kenneth alone, of Chloe's mother, destroyed for daring to speak the truth. She thought of Mr. Augustus, silenced in his last days, unable to protect the woman he loved. I don't want to turn back, Priya replied. Never again. She hung up and looked towards the Lion City Holdings building, visible in the distance, its windows gleaming with the evening light like watchful eyes. Tomorrow, she would walk those corridors one last time, but not as the woman who cleaned in silence, but as the woman who came to reclaim what had always been hers. What Priya didn't know was that while she was preparing for the legal battle of her life, someone else was preparing a surprise that no one, absolutely no one, saw coming. And that surprise had a name. Daniel Lee, the finance director everyone believed loyal to Marcus Tay, harbored a secret of his own, a secret that could save Priya or destroy her forever. Priya didn't sleep that night either, but this time it wasn't from fear or uncertainty. It was because she was going over every detail, every document, every word she would say when the time came. Sitting at her grandmother's kitchen table, surrounded by papers and folders, she felt the weight of generations on her shoulders. Augustus's love for Amelia, Amelia's sacrifice for her, Uncle George's loyalty, Chloe's silent courage. All those invisible threads had brought her here. Before dawn, her phone rang. It was Isabel. Priya. The expert finished the analysis. The documents are authentic. Every signature, every seal, every notarial record is legitimate and verifiable. We have a case. And the injunction? Already drafted. We will file it first thing in the High Court of Singapore. Commercial Division. The assigned judge is Justice Catherine Lim. She is strict but fair. If our evidence is solid, and it is, she will freeze all of Lion City Holdings' assets before noon. I'll be ready. Priya, one more thing. I received a call last night, someone claiming to have crucial information about the case and wanting to meet me before the hearing. He didn't want to give his name over the phone, only said he works within Lion City Holdings and can no longer remain silent. Priya's heart raced. Daniel Lee. It had to be him. Do you trust this person? I don't trust anyone until I see proof. But if it's really an insider willing to testify, that would bulletproof our case in a way that not even Marcus's best lawyers could dismantle. Priya hung up and stared at the photograph of her grandmother and Mr. Augustus she had found in the recipe box. Two people who loved each other against all odds. Two people whom the system tried to separate and silence, but whose love had left seeds that were now about to blossom. She dressed carefully, not in expensive clothes or elegant brands. She dressed with the dignity of someone who knows exactly who she is and where she comes from. Before leaving, she stopped by the hospital. Madame Amelia was awake, sitting in bed with some color returning to her cheeks. Dr. So had said her recovery was remarkable, that rest was restoring strength that stress had stolen from her. Grandma, Priya sat beside her and took her hands. Today is the day. Madame Amelia looked at her with those eyes that had guarded secrets for decades. You found the documents. I found them. And I found much more. I found Uncle George. I found allies. I found the complete truth. Madame Amelia's hands trembled. My dear, do you know what this means? They're gonna fight with everything they have. I know, but I'm not alone anymore. And I'm not afraid anymore. A tear rolled down Madame Amelia's cheek, but it was a different tear from those Priya had seen before. It wasn't of pain or worry, it was of relief. The relief of someone who has carried an impossible weight for a lifetime and can finally let go. Your grandfather would be so proud of you, Madame Amelia whispered. I am so proud of you. Priya kissed her forehead. When I return, I'm going to bring you good news, I promise. She left the hospital with the sun barely peeking over the city buildings. The streets were beginning to awaken with that everyday rhythm of people going to jobs they loved or tolerated. Priya thought of how many of those people carried their own secrets, silent injustices, truths the world wouldn't let them shout. Today she would shout for all of them. The High Court of Singapore, Commercial Division, was an imposing building that smelled of old wood and slow justice. Isabel waited for her on the entrance steps, with her worn briefcase and the expression of a warrior before battle, but she was not alone. Beside her, with the expression of someone who hadn't slept in days and dark circles that told stories of nights of remorse, was Daniel Lee. Priya stopped dead in her tracks. The finance director of Lion City Holdings, the man she had heard talking on the phone about silencing her grandmother, was there in front of the court beside her lawyer. Priya, Isabel stepped forward. I'd like to introduce you to our surprise witness. Daniel took a step towards Priya, and she could see up close what corporate distance had always hidden. A man consumed by guilt. Miss Sharma. His voice was barely audible. I know you have no reason to trust me. I've been part of all this for too long. I saw things I should have reported. And I didn't. I participated in conversations I should have stopped. And I didn't. But there's a limit to what my conscience can bear. And what was that limit? Priya asked, without softening her tone. Daniel pulled a USB stick from his pocket. Recently, Marcus ordered me to prepare documents to transfer all the company's assets to an offshore shell corporation. When I saw the numbers, when I understood the magnitude of what he was asking me to do, I knew that if I signed those papers, I would be helping to steal what legitimately belongs to your family. You've known for years that my grandmother was the founder's wife? I suspected it. I found references in old documents that Horacio Tay didn't completely destroy, but I never had the courage to investigate thoroughly. Until now. He held up the USB stick. Here is all the financial evidence. Account movements, hidden transfers, altered documents, everything Horacio did to divert assets that belong to your grandmother, and everything Marcus has continued to do. It's enough to prove decades of patrimonial fraud. Isabel took the USB stick with the reverence of someone receiving an invaluable piece of evidence. With this, we not only freeze the assets, we open a criminal investigation. They entered the court. The hearing was intense, but brief. Justice Catherine Lim meticulously examined each document. The originals from the recipe box, Uncle George's sworn affidavits, the handwriting expert's analysis, Daniel's financial evidence, Chloe's intercepted email about the asset transfer. Each piece fit together like a puzzle that had waited decades to be assembled. After examining everything, Justice Lim pronounced the words that changed history. The emergency injunction is approved. All assets of Lion City Holdings are frozen until the patrimonial claim of the Lim Sharma family is resolved. Any attempt at transfer will be considered judicial contempt. Priya closed her eyes and breathed. For the first time in days, the air completely filled her lungs. But the legal battle was only the first part. Now came the hardest part. Confronting Marcus Tay. Isabel had told her it wasn't necessary, that the court would notify him, that she didn't have to step foot in that building again. But Priya needed to do it. Not for revenge, not for pride, but because there was a silent promise she needed to keep. The promise that she would never again walk those corridors with her head down. She arrived at Lion City Holdings at noon. She entered through the main door, not the service door. Chloe saw her from reception, and her eyes widened in surprise, then understanding, and finally something that looked like admiration. Priya walked towards the main elevator, the one she had always been forbidden to use. She pressed the button for the top floor, the executive level. The doors opened, and Priya walked down the marble corridor she had cleaned hundreds of times. Each step resonated with a firmness she had never had before. Assistants looked up from their screens, confused to see the cleaning staff member walking down the executive corridor as if it belonged to her because it did. Marcus's office door was open. He was inside, talking on the phone with a furious expression. Kenneth Leong sat opposite him, with the pallor of someone who had just received catastrophic news. Priya entered without knocking. Marcus looked up, his expression shifting from fury to confusion in a fraction of a second. "What are you doing here? Who let you up?" "I came to speak with you, Mr. Tay." "I don't have time for this." Marcus rose from his chair, his face reddening. "Can't you see I'm in the middle of a crisis? Someone froze my company's assets." "I know," Priya replied calmly. "It was me." The silence that fell in the office was so absolute that the hum of the air conditioning 3 floors below could be heard. Kenneth slowly stood up, his face turning into a mask of alarm. "You?" Marcus let out a laugh that sounded more like a bark than a laugh. "The cleaning staff froze the assets of a multi-million-dollar company? Is this a joke?" "It's no joke." Priya took a copy of the court document from her bag and placed it on Marcus's desk. "This is the order from the High Court of Singapore, Commercial Division, approving an injunction on all assets of Lion City Holdings, based on a legitimate patrimonial claim by the Lim Sharma family." Marcus's face went from red to white in an instant. "Lim Sharma? What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about my grandmother, Madame Amelia Lim, being the legitimate wife of Mr. Augustus Wong, founder of this company, and according to the original foundational charter, 50% of everything you see around you belongs to us." Kenneth grabbed the document and read it with eyes that widened with each line. His hands began to tremble. "This can't be real," Marcus murmured. "This bears the court's seal. It's a legitimate court order." Marcus rounded his desk and stood in front of Priya. His face was distorted by a fury that seemed to come from the deepest part of his being. He raised his finger and pointed it directly at Priya's face, so close she could feel the tremor of his hand. "You're fired!" he bellowed, with such force that his voice resonated throughout the executive floor. "Did you hear me? You're fired! Get out of my company, out of my building! Security!" Priya did not retreat an inch. She didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't lower her gaze. She smiled, and that smile was more devastating than any shout Marcus could utter. "You cannot fire me, Mr. Tay," she said, with a serenity that brutally contrasted with Marcus's hysteria. "Because as of today, according to the law and the original documents of this company, I am not your employee." She took a step forward, and for the first time in his life, Marcus Tay recoiled from someone he considered inferior. "I am the new owner." The words fell upon the office like a silent earthquake. Kenneth dropped the document. Marcus's assistant, who had run in upon hearing the shouts, stood paralyzed at the door. Through the windows, the entire city gleamed under the midday sun, oblivious to the fact that power within that building had just changed hands forever. Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came out. For the first time in his life, the man who always had the last word was completely speechless. At that moment, the elevator opened, and Isabel Lim entered, followed by Sean Ing with his journalistic team, and behind them, in a wheelchair pushed by Dr. So, Madame Amelia Lim. Priya felt her heart stop. "Grandma, what are you doing here?" Madame Amelia raised her hand, asking to be brought closer. "Doctor." So pushed her until she was in front of Marcus Tay. The elderly woman looked at the man who represented everything his family had stolen from hers, and spoke with a voice that, though weak, contained the strength of a lifetime of silent resistance. "Your father stole my husband's voice. You tried to steal my dignity. But you could never steal our truth. Because truth, my son, is like water. It always finds its way." Marcus stared at her as if he were seeing a ghost, and in a way, he was. He was seeing the ghost of all the lies his family had built for decades, materializing before him in the form of an old woman in a wheelchair who held more power than he ever would. Priya knelt beside her grandmother and hugged her. Both cried, not from sadness, but from justice, from that kind of emotion that has no name in any language, because it is too big, too deep, too human to fit into words. Uncle George entered last, walking slowly but with his back straight. When Madame Amelia saw him, she extended her hand to him. "Uncle George, old friend, we did it. We did it, Amelia." Augustus would be proud. Marcus Tay slumped into his chair, defeated. The man who had shouted, "You're fired," minutes earlier now seemed to be the one who had been fired. Fired from his own throne of lies. And amidst all that chaos of emotions, truths, and delayed justice, Priya looked out the window at the city that stretched infinitely under the sun. Her grandmother had taught her that when you are invisible, you see everything. Now the whole world was seeing her. The hours that followed the confrontation in Marcus Tay's office were a whirlwind that Priya would forever live in her memory. Sean Ing published the story that same afternoon, not as a sensationalist note or just another corporate scandal. He wrote it as what it truly was, a love story that had survived decades of injustice and a woman who had cleaned the floors of her own empire without knowing it. The news spread like wildfire. Every media outlet in the country wanted the exclusive. Every social network buzzed with opinions, comments, and millions of people sharing Priya and Madame Amelia's story. The trending hashtag simply read, "Truth always finds its way." But while the outside world exploded in reactions, inside Lion City Holdings, a sepulchral silence reigned. Employees walked the corridors like ghosts, whispering among themselves, unsure if they would have jobs the next day, if the company would survive, if everything they had professionally built would crumble along with the Tay family's lies. Priya thought of them, of each one of them. The secretaries who worked late without recognition, the security guards who watched over a building that didn't belong to them, the cleaning staff who, like her, had been invisible for years. Those people were not to blame for Marcus's sins or his father's, and Priya would not allow them to pay for them. Days later, Justice Catherine Lim convened a formal hearing to resolve the patrimonial case. The High Court of Singapore, Commercial Division, was packed. Journalists, cameras, lawyers, curious onlookers, and Lion City Holdings employees who had taken the day off to be present. The air was charged with that electricity that only appears when history is about to be written. Priya entered the court accompanied by Isabella Lim, who carried a file so thick it needed help to place it on the table. Behind them came Uncle George, walking with a dignity that neither years nor threats had been able to break. And next to him, in her wheelchair, but with eyes more alive than ever, Madame Amelia. Across the aisle, Marcus Tay sat with a team of 5 lawyers from the country's most expensive corporate law firm. But there was something different in his expression. The arrogance he had always worn as a shield was cracked. His eyes held the shadows left by insomnia when mixed with the fear of losing everything one believed to possess. Kenneth Leong was not present. Isabel quietly informed Priya that he had resigned as Lion City Holdings' legal representative the night before. A rat abandoning the sinking ship. Justice Lim opened the session with a solemn tone. This court has thoroughly reviewed the evidence presented by both parties. The amount of documentary evidence in this case is extraordinary, and the implications are of a magnitude rarely seen in commercial matters. She proceeded to enumerate each piece of evidence. The original foundational charter, with the clause protecting Amelia's rights, the marriage certificate between Mr. Augustus Wong and Amelia Lim, Uncle George's sworn affidavits maintained and renewed for decades, the handwriting expert's analysis confirming the authenticity of all signatures, the financial evidence provided by Daniel Lee showing years of asset diversion, and Chloe Tan's testimony documenting recent attempts to transfer assets to shell companies. Mr. Tay's defense argues that these documents could have been falsified, the judge continued, looking directly at Marcus's legal team. However, the independent forensic analysis has determined, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the documents are original and authentic. The signatures verifiably correspond to Mr. Augustus Wong. The notarial seals are legitimate and registered in the National Archives. She paused for what seemed an eternity. Furthermore, this court has received an additional piece of evidence that the defense has not been able to refute. Priya looked at Isabel with confusion. Additional evidence? The judge nodded towards a bailiff, who opened a side door. Through it entered an elderly man, elegant, with a diplomatic bearing and serene expression. Priya didn't know him, but Uncle George abruptly stood up, his eyes widening as if he had seen someone he thought lost forever. "Nicholas," Uncle George whispered, his voice trembling. The man nodded with a contained smile. "Hello, old friend." Isabel leaned towards Priya. "His name is Mr. Nicolas Pereira. He was the public notary who certified the original foundational charter of Lion City Holdings. He has lived abroad for years. My team located him last week. He flew in last night specifically to testify." Mr. Nicolas Pereira took the witness stand with the calm of someone who had waited decades for this moment. "I personally certified the foundational charter of Lion City Holdings," he declared in a clear voice. "And I certify before this court that the clause protecting the rights of Madame Amelia Lim Sharma was included by the express and conscious will of Mr. Augustus Wong. He was in full possession of his mental faculties. In fact, he specifically asked me to keep an additional copy in my personal files, anticipating that someone might try to destroy the originals. He pulled out a sealed envelope. This is that copy. It has remained in my personal safe deposit box all this time. It was never opened or altered." The judge examined the document and confirmed it was identical to the others, with an additional notarial seal that made it practically impossible to challenge. Marcus's lead lawyer stood up, tried to formulate an objection, but the words died in his mouth when the judge looked at him with an expression that brooked no interruptions. "This court has heard enough," Justice Lim pronounced with authority. "Based on the totality of the evidence presented, I declare the following." The room collectively held its breath. First, Amelia Lim Sharma is legally recognized as the spouse of the founder, Mr. Augustus Wong, and as the legitimate owner of 50% of the foundational shares of Lion City Holdings. A seismic murmur ran through the room. Second, Priya Sharma is recognized as the legitimate heir and legal representative of her grandmother's patrimonial rights. Tears began to fall down Priya's face, without her being able or wanting to stop them. Third, a complete audit of all financial operations of Lion City Holdings from the death of Mr. Augustus Wong to date is ordered to determine the exact amount of assets that were illegally diverted from the patrimony of the Lim Sharma family. And fourth, the judge looked directly at Marcus. Evidence of document falsification, manipulation of medical records, and patrimonial fraud is referred to the public prosecutor's office for the opening of a criminal investigation against those responsible. The gavel fell with a thud that echoed like a thunderclap of justice. The courtroom erupted. Applause, shouts, crying. Journalists rushed towards the exits with the biggest news of the year. Lawyers shook hands. Strangers embraced as if they were family. But amidst all that glorious chaos, there was a moment of perfect silence. Madame Amelia extended her arms from the wheelchair, and Priya knelt before her, burying her face in her grandmother's lap, as she did as a child when the world was too big, and her grandmother's arms were the only safe haven. "We did it, Grandma," she sobbed. "We did it." Madame Amelia stroked her granddaughter's hair with hands that still trembled, but now trembled with happiness. "No, my dear, you did it, you and your grandfather. He planted the seed, I protected it, but you made it blossom." Uncle George approached and placed his hand on Amelia's shoulder. The two elders looked at each other with eyes that contained oceans of shared memories, fulfilled promises, of a loyalty that neither time nor power had been able to corrupt. Augustus would be crying with joy right now, Uncle George said with a broken voice. And he would probably scold us for taking so long. Amelia laughed through tears. He was always impatient, but he was also always right. Truth delays, but it arrives. Marcus Tay left the court without speaking to anyone. His lawyers surrounded him like a shield, but no legal shield could protect him from what was coming. The criminal investigation would reveal every lie, every fraud, every injustice his family had committed for generations. The man who that morning had entered the court as CEO of an empire left as a man whose world had collapsed under the weight of his own lies. Weeks later, the audit results confirmed what everyone suspected. The Tay family had diverted enormous amounts of assets that legally belonged to Amelia. The public prosecutor's office filed formal charges against Marcus for patrimonial fraud and against Kenneth Leong for complicity and obstruction of justice. Both would face legal proceedings that would extend for a long time. Daniel Lee fully cooperated with the authorities. His testimony was fundamental to reconstruct the complete map of the financial fraud. In exchange for his collaboration, he received partial immunity. But the real reason he had taken the step was not legal, it was personal. "I have children," he told Priya in a private conversation after the trial. "And someday they will ask me what I did when I had to choose between the easy and the right thing. I want to be able to look them in the eyes and tell them that I chose the right thing, even if it took me too long." Chloe Tan was publicly recognized for her role in the investigation. The cameras Kenneth had installed had indeed recorded her accessing confidential information. But given that this information was used to expose illegal activities, Justice Lim determined that her actions were protected under whistleblower laws. But what moved Priya the most was what Chloe did with her recognition. She didn't ask for money or compensation. She asked for something much more valuable. "I want my mother's name cleared," she said before the cameras in a firm voice, but with tears shining in her eyes. Grace Tan was professionally destroyed for daring to speak the truth. She never recovered from that. "All I ask is that the world knows my mother was not a traitor. She was a brave woman who paid the price for her honesty." Priya personally made sure that happened. Grace Tan's name was inscribed on a commemorative plaque in the main lobby of Lion City Holdings, along with a dedication that read, "To the silenced voices who never stopped screaming within." The day Chloe saw that plaque, she cried for a long time, embracing Priya. They didn't need words. The embrace said everything no language in the world could express. Uncle George was finally able to tell his story publicly. Sean Ng dedicated a series of articles to him, revealing not only his role as guardian of the truth, but the complete story of Mr. Augustus Wong, a man who built an empire with honesty and who loved a humble woman with a devotion that transcended even his own death. Mr. Nicolas Pereira, the notary who had flown in to testify, met with Uncle George and Amelia at a private dinner, where the three elders shared memories of Mr. Augustus that they had never been able to tell aloud. They laughed, cried, and toasted a man whose legacy had finally been honored. Sometime later, Priya officially took control of 50% of Lion City Holdings, but the first thing she did was not to sit in the executive office or redecorate the boardroom. The first thing she did was go down to the basement, to the cleaning staff changing room. She stood in front of the rusty lockers, in front of the flickering fluorescent lights, in front of the cracked mirror where she and her grandmother had looked at themselves so many times before starting their shifts. And she cried. She cried for the girl who had grown up pushing cleaning trolleys. She cried for the young woman who had endured humiliations in silence. She cried for her grandmother, who had cleaned the floors of her own empire without anyone knowing it, and then she wiped away her tears and started to work. Her first decision as co-owner was to completely renovate the service staff facilities. New lockers, adequate lighting, a dignified dining area, and something that had never existed, an educational scholarship program for the children of all maintenance and cleaning employees. "Talent doesn't need an important surname to be real," Priya said at the inauguration ceremony with Madame Amelia by her side. "It only needs an opportunity. And this company, from today, will be dedicated to creating those opportunities." Her second decision was to change the company's name. It would no longer be just Lion City Holdings. It would be Lion City Holdings Wong Sharma, because both surnames had built that empire, although the world had only recognized one for too long. Her third decision was to create a foundation in her grandfather's name, the Augustus Wong Foundation, dedicated to supporting exceptionally talented individuals who lacked resources or formal credentials to prove their worth. Because if Priya had learned anything from her own story, It was that the world was full of extraordinary people whom no one gave the opportunity to shine. Ning won a National Journalism Award for his coverage of the case. In his acceptance speech, he said something that resonated deeply. This story taught me that the most important news is not in the halls of power. It is in the corridors no one looks at, in the voices no one listens to, in the people the world considers invisible. Isabel Lim expanded her law firm, dedicating herself exclusively to cases of patrimonial justice for families dispossessed of their rights. Every time she won a case, she sent a message to Priya, another family with a voice. Months after the trial, on a quiet afternoon, Priya took her grandmother back to the Lion City Holdings building, but they didn't enter through the service door or the main door. They went directly to the rooftop, where the entire city spread before them like a map of infinite possibilities. Madame Amelia, now recovered and with color returning to her cheeks, thanks to the relief of no longer carrying secrets, looked at the horizon with eyes that sparkled like those of the young woman who had fallen in love with a dreamer named Augustus. "Do you know what makes me most proud of you?" she asked her granddaughter. "What, Grandma?" "That you didn't use power for revenge. You used power to build. That's exactly what your grandfather would have done." Priya smiled, and in that smile was everything. The pain of years of humiliation, the sweetness of delayed justice, and the hope of a future where no one would have to be invisible to survive. "Grandma, do you remember what you always told me? That when you are invisible, you see everything?" "Of course I remember. Well, you were right. I saw everything. I saw the injustice, I saw the abuse, I saw the lies, but I also saw something more important." "What did you see, my dear?" Priya took her grandmother's hand and squeezed it gently. "I saw that true love doesn't need recognition to exist. I saw that dignity is not granted by a title or a surname. I saw that truth can be buried for years, but it never dies. And I saw that a woman who cleans floors can have more greatness in her hands than all the executives in the world combined." Madame Amelia closed her eyes, letting the evening breeze caress her face. A solitary tear rolled down her cheek, but it was a tear of peace. The peace of someone who can finally rest after a lifetime of silent struggle. "Your grandfather told me something the last time I saw him alive," she whispered. "He told me, Amelia, someday the world will know who you are, and that day will not be because someone gave you permission to shine. It will be because our granddaughter will light such a great light that no one will be able to ignore it." Priya hugged her grandmother as the sun began to descend over the city, painting the sky with colors that seemed to celebrate that moment. Below, in the streets, millions of people went about their lives, unaware that high atop that building, two women were closing a circle of love that had begun generations ago. A love that survived rejection, silence, betrayal, time. A love that was transmitted not in inheritances or legal documents, but in something much more powerful. In the way a grandmother teaches her granddaughter that true wealth is not in what you possess, but in who you are when no one is watching you. Because in the end, this was never a story about a company, about money, or about power. It was a story about a woman who cleaned floors all her life to protect a secret of love, and about a granddaughter who honored that love by demonstrating that dignity is not inherited. It is built every day with every act of courage, with every truth we dare to speak aloud, and with every time we choose to be light in a world that tries to make us invisible.